trying to do stuff with very limited resource and dreaming, if you like. If you lose your own purpose, you can very easily just be going along with what other people are doing. We're coming to the end of June, which means one thing. It's been one whole year playing the long game. So we're primarily going to be talking about that. So the long game was never actually the plan, was it? So let's reverse a little. So we won't go right back to the beginning, we'll just go to this time last year, so last June, and where we were. So we was in Portmew, near Marseille, near a town called Cassis, and we just recently lost a bit of work we was doing, and it had just come through this boat, which turned out to be the same as the exact boat I had before. We could have for free, and the aim was, well, coming to June, we were starting to realise that boat had a bit more to do than we initially thought, and money was flat out. So back then, we did what anybody would do, and while trying to get back on our feet in the middle of nowhere, and feel free to Google this place, it's very difficult to get anywhere from there, and the town itself close by, unless you spoke fluent French, you're going to really struggle to find any work. There's no big ports close by other than in Marseille, but you know, you're looking at a 3-hour commute, sometimes longer, to even get into Marseille. We was kind of stuck. And the plan was to go do boat trips like we had done the summer before over in Cannes, where we was in a rush to leave the year before, but now that seemed like the best option. Right, so if we go back to last June in YouTube episodes, and you don't have to go that far back, it's episode 85, it's actually the last episode I put on, you know, of the Let's Tell a Story episode by episode. Since then, various things has happened, and there's been sort of real-time updates, shipwreck videos, all the rest of it. But as far as actual episodes, that's where we're up to. June last year, a whole year ago. And in that last episode, episode 85, I am in Portmew, as I say, and June should have marked a payment. So I'll get into it. I'll just say it as it is. I do get some grief for it, but I just lost a job. I had a plan what I wanted to do, what I was going to do, and social security is the name of it. You know, you pay into a system while you're working, and it should protect you then while you're not. However, there was always going to be a wait. So when I'd lost a job leading up to, you know, the end of June, you can't just sit doing nothing. As I've mentioned, it was very difficult to go get work anywhere close to there. So what I did, going back to that episode, is I had applied for, you know, I'll say it as it is, just to make everything clear, 555 euros per month. And, you know, that's the standard amount anybody who's not working or whatever can get. So, you know, I don't mind getting a hard time for it. It kind of makes the story make sense, and it's not something I wanted to sit around doing. But whilst being there, that's, you know, standard money someone would get in order to be able to survive while they did whatever, you know. I won't go into forever justifying that, but I applied for it. And because it was going to take some time, I'd never had a French bank account, so I have French residency, which is very quickly disappearing from me probably, but I had French residency, opened a French bank account, and in France you have what's called the deferred debit. So my French credit rating's always been pretty good because, you know, I had phone contract, always managed to pay it, all the rest of it. French credit was pretty good. had this option to open this new bank account that came with an overdraft and a deferred credit limit. So just to put it into numbers, that effectively opened up, I think the overdraft was 800, the deferred credit limit was about 1,500, and if I could have used that all, you know, that's enough money in theory to get that boat out of there and go and earn some money doing boat trips. However, I did it thinking, you know, I'm gonna get the French social security, you know, survival money, and that I'm gonna be able to make it over to Cannes. So in that episode you see me buy a bunch of tools, buy, you know, a new charge controller, I get a little EcoFlow so that I'm able to work, got everything, I'm not having to go spend all my days in the toilet block, all the rest of it, and then it all goes wrong. So where did it go wrong? So I've got this credit limit and I've got a month and a half from the day I'm talking about to have to pay it back. So it's a risk. But you know, if it had worked out, it'd have worked out. I can quickly tell you about the day it started to go wrong. I was in L'Estaque, which I later end up in, but nothing to do with that boat I ended up with in L'Estaque. There was a temporary thing going on there. I'm not going to go into it in this video, but I was there in L'Estaque, staying at the weekends in a apartment there with someone I was talking to at the time, and I'd gone over there. I could go into a really long story here about how I turned down going on a holiday to Greece, so I unravel a whole box of things there. But yeah, I could have gone on holiday to Greece. It's hard not to go into it while talking about it now, but I'll save that for a completely different video. But I'm like, no, I need to get this boat moving. I can't go, you know, throw a bunch of money into going to Greece. I need to get this moving. But I had just been in L'Estaque, and I go to get the train back to my boat, and the card didn't work. And yeah, basically what happened was, because nothing had been paid into the account, and I don't think it should work like this. The fraud team got involved and they blocked the card. Now, up until that point, I'd bought some tools, I'd bought an EcoFlow, a little EcoFlow, charge controller, and I was like, let's do this, let's get this boat moving. And, you know, I'd maybe spend, I don't know, 400, 500, 600, but you know, I still had a big chunk. You know, I could have gone to the supermarket and stocked the boat with food. I didn't realise the card was going. It told me I had this limit, I could use it, and then all of a sudden, bang, it's blocked. And I'm like, oh no, like, suddenly the EcoFlow wasn't the most important thing, neither were the tools, and now the card's blocked. So that plan was very quickly fallen through. You know, I don't regret doing that, and I do think if it had have paid off, it could have paid off. You know, all of the things I was getting, I would essentially have needed in the long run anyway. And if that boat had have made it to Cannes, I turned down 15 boat trips that summer without even advertising for them. However, that card gets blocked. I contact the bank and they're like, no, like, until you pay something into it, it's blocked. So then, okay, I'm waiting for this social security. I've not used that much yet, and 2 months worth of 555 euros a month, it's going to cover that anyway. So it's like, okay, we dig our heels in, we wait, and if the episodes are carried on from there, you know, which one day I hope they will, I'm painting the boat. I had a bit of paint. I'm trying to fix the rigging, and in my head, I'm like, one more thing can't go wrong, and it's going to be all right. So we're talking June. Without going into the whole story, we're talking June. We're waiting for this social security money to happen. It doesn't come at the end of June. We then have an issue with some people locally, which you might have seen a real-time update about, because there were a few real-time updates around the time, and a phone gets broke. We end up just royally in a bit of a pickle. We have no money, and quickly all time ends up being diverted into just surviving. And it was kind of new back then. I didn't realize back then, and that's why this is called the long game, that so long was going to pass with no income. So the whole point here is 1 year with no real income, because the credit card, if you like, that lasted a few days and that got stopped. We got some tools, an EcoFlow charge controller, some electric stuff, all of which later down the line end up getting absolutely destroyed. So it could have paid off. I think that's the best I can say there. It could have paid off. We could have got back over to Cannes. We could have done them 15 boat trips that weren't even advertised for, plus any on top that we'd advertised for, and we would have paid it back, have a working boat. And I was talking to someone the other day on the phone, and take the loan out of the equation. They said to me, if you'd have just received this 550 a month, I think you'd have got out, and the rest that happened since then potentially wouldn't have happened. So that would beg the question, can you live on a sailboat and maintain a sailboat and all the rest of it, for 550 a month? Probably not. And the reason the person who I was talking to said that probably is because they've seen the whole first year of this, where I was going around, in their words, I've never had a working boat, and I kind of made it work the best I could and got by. And just to touch on the boat trips again, I'll put a few photos around the screen. I feel like that part of it, and may have said before, I didn't really get to appreciate kind of how cool it was what I was doing. And I know then during last June, the desperation to be able to go do it again after having just a winter where I kind of just had to sit and process a few things and all the rest of it, and realise that that was pretty cool. You was out there on the water. I kind of just wanted it back. And the reason that person probably said, yeah, you could have made it work with not that much, is because I kind of did before. I know everything that's happened since, and what has been quite hard with YouTube and coming on and making videos is that first year, just on paper, yeah, things broke. The engine broke while we was out at sea. I never had a working rigging. Like, I had a makeshift rig the whole time, and yeah, it's irresponsible, but a lot of people advertise the things that I always mention, and I think what gets confused is I think people think I'm saying it like bitterly, and maybe if I'm being really honest, there is an element there that it's not bitter, but I kind of remember being the only boat out at anchor the winter before, and yeah, what I struggle with now is I kind of lost all credibility, if you like, because suddenly I can't get outdone. And it does come down to money. However, with just a small amount, I probably could have made it work. Because, I just needed to do the minimum, sell a few boat trips. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I'm not selling sailing trips, do you know what I mean? I'm selling firework boat trips where with the motor you go out, you take some people out. You know, if the motor stopped and you couldn't get it working again, you have to pay for the boat to come out and take the people back. Like, and you're paying, do you know what I mean? It's not like the UK where it's a lifeboat, and I never once have actually relied on a lifeboat to come and save me. So, yeah, I won't go deeply into all of that, but I think that's why I probably could have made it work. And I should say that confidently, because I did for a year, over a year, kind of go out on a boat that didn't really work and get by and make some videos. So I probably could have made it work. Anyway, less of the desperate defending myself. I just thought it was worth saying. But yeah, June, you know, all of that then kind of goes a bit wrong. That takes us into July and August. So, you know, that's June, out of the way. Things have gone kind of wrong. We're in this kind of survival mode, whatever. Still trying to get out of there. I'm rolling into July and August. We didn't really at any point give up trying to get out of there and do the boat trips. Even coming towards the end of August, it was like we could maybe still sell some in September. And just to go back to it, because I can't do this video without going to it, we're anticipating this money to go in. So in June, there's, you know, 2 months of money probably then already from when I lost my job and applied, whatever. So we're talking £1,000. So then after July and August, we're now talking £2,000 going into September. And yeah, we thought it was going to work. And there's a few other things that make this, like, why it weren't as black and white as I think when I put videos on the internet people might think it was. The first one being, we had a boat to get rid of. So the old boat we needed to get rid of. The port I was in, and if anybody is watching from there, you know, we'll get to what happens, and it doesn't end sourly. But it doesn't end ideally either. And essentially, you know, they can't have someone in there that's stuck there. And they did let me stay for the winter. You know, the harbour master, if you like, there is a great guy. Like, you can probably see in the videos during the winter, was going and picking some berries and stuff. The guy was great, and that's going to run out. And I've always said I would love to go back there one day with a bottle of rum for him, you know, on a boat. So the boats that have happened since, but a boat, like, yeah, thanks for everything you did for me, I'm now alright, etc. So yeah, back to the point. They can't just have someone there, you know, a freeloader, if you like. So it kind of gets to a point where pressures then come in from the port, and I won't say the guy who runs the port, I'll say the other people in the port that don't know really what's going on, but you're trying to get out of a situation. And I think the thing when I look back is there's a bunch of people who get this basic money. I'm gonna actually say it, you know, in the south of France there's a whole bunch of people, some of them are going to see this and I'm going to get some grief, but there's a whole bunch of people, we're talking like social media influencers, we're talking spiritual tarot readers, you know, all sorts of people that are doing what they want to be doing while receiving help from the government. So, you know, equally, there's a bunch of people living on boats doing the same thing. So it is quite difficult when you're then being judged as this like outsider who's, you know, shouldn't be. And I'm English as well, so, you know, my French residency quickly gets like, nobody cares about. It's like, why is this English guy here not paying or whatever? People make assumptions. And, you know, I probably over the last however many years paid more into that system than a lot of the people who would have been complaining did. But anyway, yeah, so it gets to a point coming into the end of July where I obviously can't be there, and for the sake of this video I'm getting, you know, far enough into it without just going into everything that happened in July and August. Survival literally did mean, survival sounds like a strong word, doesn't it? Like I'm being dramatic, but survival was, a lot of the time, you know, rice and beans, all the rest of it. I watched a big sailing channel the other day going on about the time they had to survive off rice and beans, and honestly this was surviving off rice and beans mostly. If I am to put it bluntly, last summer was, you know, it was pretty crap. The July and August, them 2 months, were spent, you know, largely hiding from the port, and I remember some people commenting at the time like the worst thing to do is to hide, but I just didn't have an answer for anyone, you know. I was just waiting for this money to come in, and in order to then get moving, you know, and it turned from moving in order to have a summer doing boat trips to just moving in order to It's worth noting too that where I was, there was a bunch of abandoned boats just in the entrance to that port, and if I'd have left the boat there, it could have been very quick that I ended up tied on to them. So we went from being inside the port at some point during the summer, there was a real-time update of it, getting towed out and put on one of the mooring balls on the the outside. It's still within the calank, and if you're wondering what I keep saying when I say calank, it's just like a little natural sort of, it's just natural protection from most directions. It doesn't get too rough in there. So we'd already been moved out to there, but we was taking up a space, and you can't get a place in there usually in the summer anyway, so that's why there was this like, we need the space back. It was kind of said in a sense like, if you can go, you know, it's fine, you stay during the winter, we'll work something out. It's not really fair to, I can't say it, but you know, that's kind of how it was. So I needed to leave basically, but I did not have means to leave. So coming towards the end of summer, I'd kind of just fallen into this trap of seeing through the days because there weren't much else I could do. So, you know, waking up, going to another boat to have coffee, and I've got to say it for this to make sense, I found myself days after days after days sat, and I weren't even really partaking in conversation. There'd be all sorts of craziness going on, and I'd kind of be just kind of sat, and you know, I do still talk to these people, so I've got to kind of be a bit careful with what I say, but it's kind of, if you lose your own purpose, you can very easily just be going along with what other people are doing, but the purpose was still there. We still wanted to carry on, and that probably just about kept us sane enough to not fall into fully fall into what other people were doing. But it comes up on here all the time about you know, one specific commenter sometimes decides to have an outburst of oh, have you been smoking weed? I don't do it, but for the most of that summer I was just surrounded by a bunch of people who were during the day stoned, on an evening stoned, and I haven't got anything against it, but it is quite hard when you're just in that and everybody around you is, you know, stoned, and you're sat, you know, I had two choices. I could spend the evening sat in my boat on my own, sometimes I would be sat on somebody else's boat actively like, come on, just go back, sit on your own. But it was very difficult because, and I'm definitely not slagging these people off, because this like little community sort of thing, it worked in a lot of ways. Everybody kind of did the bit. I'd given my boat to somebody who, I was then trying to help them get that back on the water too, whilst, but we're all trying to do stuff with very limited resource and dreaming, if you like. So, in a nutshell, that kind of covers June, July and August of last year, and a bit of an honest sort of what was happening. And I did originally pick the camera up thinking I was gonna the long game and fit it all in 20 minutes, but the thing with that is it is quite hard to explain how things happened in just I could do it, do you know what I mean? I could just be like, June, this happened, this happened, this happened. I could do it quite quick, but then, we're not really getting the real story. It doesn't really then explain certain decisions, and it definitely doesn't justify why I've just spent a year on a boat with no real income other than YouTube. And that's, that kind of has been what's got me through. You do get some grief. Some people sometimes say that you're coming on the internet and begging, which during the worst of it, I tend to not be on here saying, oh, I'm doing X, Y and Z in order to survive, because I don't want to really do that. Generally the video camera gets picked up, the GoPro gets picked up when I'm doing alright, more than anything, when I'm like, right, okay, we've got a lifeline here, let's get a boat moving. And there's actually 10 episodes queued on YouTube about trying to get out of Marseille this last time. The reason they haven't gone on yet is just because I haven't got the rest of the footage and I'm missing a gap in the middle. But equally, the reason I'd like to make these videos now is because I just kind of want to explain it, because I'm also doing something now which I'm pausing putting the videos on, because I'm like, I said earlier in this video, lost credibility, and it does feel a lot like that to me. It just feels like I lost, credibility. And I'm not saying we had much in the beginning, do you know what I mean? But I don't forget. It's weird, honestly. I sometimes get into bed on a night time and I close my eyes and I've got these flashes of like all the things that happened during like year one of doing this. And if I now look back at some of them videos, and I'm like, oh, I can't even believe that happened. But without telling the story in as much detail as I can to try and fit into a little video for YouTube, it's quite hard to make it make sense and move forward. So if you did enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up for me. I'd appreciate that. And in part 2, we're going to be discussing what happened after last summer. And yeah, if we can get 3 months into that 20 minutes, great. And hopefully by the end of a few little episodes like this, everybody will understand why I am still somehow, by some miracle, sat on a boat with no money. So yeah, I'll see you in the next part, and thanks for watching.